Welcome back. Let's start off with a recap of President Trump's week. On Saturday at around 6 a.m., he accused former President Barack Obama of wiretapping him during the election. Trump provided no evidence to back up the claim, and FBI Director James Comey asked the Justice Department to publicly reject the claim. A new travel ban was unveiled. This time, the Iraq was not on one of the countries. An indefinite ban on Syrian refugees has been lifted. Republicans released their plan to repeal and replace the Affordable Health Care Act. And President Trump is giving his full support to the legislation, which is now being called Trump Care. And a labor report out today shows 235,000 jobs were added during Trump's first month in office. And joining us for more on Trump's administration's 7th week in office is Frank Alcock, ABC 7's political analyst, Mark Weston, a presidential election historian and the author of The Runner-Up Presidency. And joining us by Skype from Tallahassee is State Representative Joe Gruters of Sarasota, the man who helped win Donald Trump, Florida. And Joe, let me start with you because, last Saturday morning at 6 a.m., the tweets about President Obama wiretapping him, so far they have been not only unsubstantiated but also knocked down by the chairs of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. How concerned are you that these claims will not be substantiated and in fact the FBI will shoot them down? And what impact does that have on the credibility of the President of the United States?
I'm not really concerned at all because, we don't see everything that the President sees, and I think that the idea that the congressional committee should investigate this fully, I think is what we need to do. And I think we should come to a conclusion, and I think give it to the congressional committees and let them produce some type of report on it.
But if you are going to accuse the former President of the United States of illegally wiretapping a presidential candidate, should you, number one, be doing it at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and number two, not offer any evidence at all?
Well, I tell you this, I'm glad that Donald Trump is working at 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings. It seems like this guy is the Energizer Bunny. He just is consistently working.
But Joe, really, come on. 6 o'clock in the morning to accuse the former president of a felony.
Do you wake up at 6 o'clock in the mornings on Saturdays? Listen, my guess is the guy is an Energizer Bunny working round the clock, and I think he probably saw some information that's the reason why he accused Obama of doing that. We obviously know that Obama has not left D.C. The guy is there trying to undermine Donald Trump every way he can. There's lots of leaks. I think the congressional committee should investigate this fully and make sure that we can come to an appropriate conclusion, and the people, if in fact it happened, are punished appropriately.
Okay, so Joe says that the investigation is where it should be in Congress, that Congress should be investigating this. Do both of you agree?
No, it's going to be a tremendous waste of time, and Congress should be devoting its time to other things. I think President Trump has confused the intelligence agency's investigation of ties between the Trump campaign and the Russians with a personal wiretap. The investigation of the Trump campaign's ties to the Russians is worth pursuing, and he shouldn't be so paranoid about it. And it's not just American intelligence agencies. British and Dutch intelligence agencies have monitored European meetings between Trump campaign officials and prominent Russians.
Frank, putting on your political analysis hat, in best case scenario, do you think that the president has stepped on his own momentum coming off of a well-received speech last week before Congress and the unveiling of the health care plan, which is getting a lot of attention, but so are these allegations?
Yes, but he steps on himself every day. And so this is nothing especially new. I think it's an embarrassing accusation, but he does these sorts of things. I don't think you're going to see it stop. There will be time and resources that'll be devoted. I don't think there was any wiretapping, but we'll find out. And I think the Russian tampering investigation, that'll run its course. It'll take some time.
Who is affected in terms of these allegations? I mean, Trump's base is not going to leave him because of this.
I'll tell you who's affected, Alan.
Go ahead.
What's interesting to me is ever since Donald Trump was elected president, everybody's been trying to undermine him in every way. And this Russian thing is really, I think it's that if you remember when Obama, before he was elected the last time, I think his words were, wait until after the election, I'll have more flexibility. I think President Obama, his minions, everybody in D.C., I think they're, well,
Joe,
at least
we have less than a minute left.
Are doing everything they can to undermine him in every possible
Joe,
way.
but isn't he undermining himself by putting out something this bombastic without a scintilla of evidence?
Absolutely not, because we don't see everything that he sees. Listen, the congressional committees need to investigate this, and if Obama broke the law, he should go to jail.
I think it's not going to hurt him with his base. And his base, there's about 1 in 3 Americans. It might get up to 40%. There's nothing that he can do that'll disappoint them, but it hurts him in the eyes of the rest of the country and the world.
Okay, we are just getting started. We'll have more on the week in Washington right after a check on our forecast, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing week 7 of the Trump administration. Our guests tonight are ABC 7 political analyst Frank Alcock, presidential historian, and author Mark Weston. And joining us by Skype is State Representative Joe Gruters of Sarasota. Joe, let me start again with you. When it comes to the unveiling of the Republican health care plan, you could have assumed that Democrats would not support it, but were you kind of surprised that the Freedom Caucus, very conservative Republicans, are also saying that they will not vote for this bill?
Well, not exactly, but you got to remember the goal of the whole thing is to lower costs by reducing regulation, giving people more choices. You know, our goal should be a free market healthcare system that's patient-centered and giving people more options. But listen, it's tough. Think of how tough it was for President Obama to get Obamacare passed in the first place. To get everybody to agree on a repeal and replace bill is not going to be easy. But listen, Donald Trump wrote the art of the deal. I'm a firm believer that if anybody can get it done, Donald Trump's the man to do it.
You know, Joe, the Brookings Institution predicted today that when the Congressional Budget Office actually comes out with a score, that it will show that at least 15 million people will lose benefits if this bill is passed.
Yeah, well, a lot of young people who are in the system now are going to be able to have the option of not buying this mandatory insurance. So that's some of the people. But yes, as they go through this, we're going to learn a lot more. But what I've also heard is don't always buy into what the CBO says, because originally they said that a lot more people were going to be buying onto this plan. And remember, a lot of the Obamacare implementation happens right now in 2017 after Obama left office. And that was done specifically so that his predecessor, whoever it was going to have to deal with the after effects of all the bad things that are left in the bill.
But one more question to you, and then I want to bring Frank and Mark back in here. But, you know, there have been a lot of Obamacare signups here in Florida. So these are your constituents who have turned to Obamacare. Are you concerned what will happen to them if they lose coverage by this bill?
The free market is always the best way to handle it. We need more health savings accounts, more options, patient-centered plan. But the last thing we need is a repeal and replacement of Obamacare with a system that hopefully everybody can get on, and it's affordable, has options, and gets people off Obamacare. You know, I can just tell you from personal experience, I went from a private healthcare plan over to the Obamacare plan. My premium went up probably $8,000 a year. My deductible went up $5,000. It was a complete loser. And you talk about me as a middle-class person. What happens is you take all my expendable income and put it into healthcare to transfer wealth on the backs of the middle class. That's what Obamacare is. What we need is a better solution, repeal and replace, and I'm hopeful that the Republicans and Donald Trump can get that job done in D.C.
Frank, your reaction?
There was a change in leadership at the CBO 2 years ago. Keith Hall was largely installed by Paul Ryan. He is a conservative Republican, a very market-oriented guy. And he's going to release a scorecard next week, and Republicans are very nervous because what that's going to show, as you know, there's going to be a significant, if not dramatic, loss in coverage with this plan. And there's also going to be higher costs, in part because some of the revenue losses. So it's going to cost Americans more. Far fewer Americans are going to be covered. And there's going to be a really important shift away from the subsidies that were income-based now to an age-based tax savings credit, and what that's going to do, it's going to really, they're going to be winners and they're going to be losers, and the folks that are going to lose are going to be low-income, working-class folks. They're going to get shafted.
Mark, there are a lot of things true here. There have been problems with Obamacare. There have been problems with the premiums going up. And there are problems, as we are learning, in terms of the Republican plan and the costs and the coverage that that offers.
Any Democrat will admit that Obamacare has flaws and that there can be improvements. I would like to see tort liability reform or nationwide insurance markets, and we would be happy to cooperate with Republicans if they want to go for those things. But they talk about having a free market, but they also want people with pre-existing conditions to be insured, and those two things don't go together very well. If you allow young people to have the freedom not to buy health insurance, you don't have enough money to insure the people with pre-existing conditions.
All right, another piece of news from today, and this is good news. The new jobs report came up, and in the last month, the first full month of the Trump presidency, 235,000 jobs were created. Joe, it's a little ironic. Candidate Trump said never believe those numbers, but they believe them today. What do you think?
Absolutely. And what people are, listen, people across this great country are optimistic about our president because he brings hope to the middle class. Just like he said, he was going to be the champion of middle America, and that's why he ended up with all those states in the Midwest. That's why he got some of these blue-collar Reagan Democrats to cross over. This month alone, 235,000 new jobs, unemployment down 4.7%, wages up 2.8% overall on an annualized basis. The debt's down $60 billion for the year. Donald Trump deserves a lot of credit for creating this momentum, optimism that's felt across this country because of his policies and his vision.
Joe, let me ask you this. Why should we believe the numbers today and not 6 months ago?
Well, I think optimism was building for Donald Trump 6 months ago, but certainly now people have had a taste.
He said the numbers are bogus.
They see what he's doing, and certainly there's one person responsible for what's going on in this country, and that's Donald Trump.
But Trump said when he was running, you cannot believe the way these numbers are put together and the monthly jobs report. So what has changed now than 6 months ago in terms of how the Labor Department puts these numbers together?
Well, I'll tell you, before, more and more people, millions of Americans were leaving the job market, and that's why he had such a hard problem with the numbers, because people were dropping off. What we're seeing now for the first time is more manufacturing jobs than government jobs. More private sector jobs than government jobs is always a winner, and it's because of his optimism that he's created. He's convincing these companies to reinvest in American factories rather than pulling out and going overseas.
Frank,
we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in a perfect society. We have to do everything we can to keep jobs here and to keep Americans employed.
Manufacturing jobs are up.
They are. It's funny, but this is a continuation of a trend that we saw under the Obama administration. And so it's a good jobs report, but we've had a long string of good job reports. And they were phony up until the first one comes in under the Trump. Now they're perfect. So
here's another issue. We have a report that illegal border crossings in the first 2 months of the Trump presidency are down by, I believe, 40%. So the question there is, has Trump's tough rhetoric been responsible for those who plan to illegally cross the border just give up on that plan because they know what might happen? In fact, the Homeland Security Secretary said we may even separate children from their parents.
I think that's quite possible, but illegal border crossings have been down for several years, actually, and there was one point last year where the net migration of Mexicans going home was actually greater than of Mexicans going into the United States. But if I were Mexican, I would probably think twice before going to America right now.
And let's try to get one more issue in here, and that is the new improved travel ban. Joe, let me put that towards your way. No longer will green card holders be affected by this. Iraq has been taken off the list of countries, but there is still some litigation that states like Washington State are filing with the federal court, basically saying it is still primarily a ban against Russians. I mean, not Russians, I'm sorry, Muslims.
There you go, bringing up Russians again. But I'll tell you, listen, the president's #1 job is to keep all Americans safe. It doesn't matter what your background is. If you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, it doesn't matter, black, white, Hispanic. The president's job is to keep you safe, and I think that this is continuation of what he's trying to do to keep all Americans safe, and I'm glad he's doing it. I'm glad he came back to the table with a new proposal, and I think this one will be accepted.
And we only have about 10 seconds
He
left.
wants to keep America safe, but he's cutting the Coast Guard budget by 14%.
Okay. We have to take a quick break, and when we return, we will have final thoughts from our guests, so stay with us. Welcome back. Will Trumpcare replace Obamacare? What does it mean for us here on the Suncoast, and what can we expect from the Trump administration going forward? Our guests join us right now with final thoughts. And Joe, let me give you the first shot at the week that was and the week that you hope to be next week.
Well, I'm just very excited about Donald Trump and what he's doing with the country. I think there's a lot of optimism around the entire country, and I think it's shown in the jobs reports. I think jobs solve a lot of issues, just like our governor, Rick Scott. Obviously, they're friends, self-made business guys. He wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. He's going to make this health care bill happen, the repeal and replace of Obamacare, which was a terrible bill for Americans. He's going to put people back to work, and he's going to be the president we all want him to be, and everybody's going to be happy. That's my guess.
Mark, do you see any sign of that?
Well, next week, the Congressional Budget Office, which is a genuinely nonpartisan organization, is going to let us know how many million fewer people are going to be insured and what the cost will be. Even Standard & Poor, a Wall Street firm, says that 6 to 10 million people will lose their insurance. So you have a lot of Republican senators balking at this bill. So it's going to be much more problematic next week.
Frank, we are seeing two things now. We are seeing things like the jobs report, the border crossings. There is a plan to replace Obamacare. Those are things that many people support. What is the likeliness that the president is going to benefit by these things and not be distracted again by everything else?
Well, he's always going to be distracted by everything else. I just don't think that's going to change. He hasn't changed from the moment he stepped into the campaign a year and a half ago. And so I think midnight tweets, a variety of other unforced errors, that's just a part of who he is. But it's not going to hurt him with his base. As we get past the first 50 days and we get into the second 50 days, he's going to continue to be aggressive on executive actions. We'll see how much progress is made on the wall. This healthcare plan, this healthcare issue is just going to be really important, not for the country, but also to the administration. I'm not sure they'll get this through. They might, but I don't think people are going to be happy with what they get if they do. So it might be better for him if they don't get this through.
Mark, would you predict it goes through or not?
No, I don't think it'll pass in the Senate.
Okay. A reminder, you can watch past Roundtable discussions on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku, including our debates with the candidates for the Sarasota Commission over the last 2 nights. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Frank Alcock is a political analyst for ABC 7 News. Mark Weston is the author and a presidential historian, and State Representative Joe Gruters represents Sarasota in the Florida House. He joined us tonight from Tallahassee. When we return, we'll have a final look at your weather, plus stand your ground denied. A Florida judge is dismissing the motion of a former police captain who shot and killed a man in a movie theater. We'll have the details in our prime time headlines.